So today I wanted to talk about this idea I've talked about in the last couple of videos of how I moved from being a Dave Ramsey coach to being more involved in the fireside Bitcoin movement. So the FIRE movement and the Bitcoin movement. And the overarching theme is that, my mission has changed. So my heart as a teacher, my heart as a coach hasn't changed, but the focus of who I want to help has changed. I'd say the better part of like the first 15 years of my coaching career, I was more of like a traditional kind of like Dave Ramsey financial coach. So I was more focused on, kind of like the behavior side of personal finance, like helping people get organized, budget, track expenses, kind of like the stuff that we all should have learned in elementary school and in our families, but we never did, kind of like I did. By the way, if we're just meeting, my name's Brad, and I'm on a mission to help millennials and Gen X more deeply integrate Bitcoin into their personal finances. I paid off $174,000 worth of debt in 2.5 years following Dave Ramsey's system. I discovered the Bitcoin and the FIRE movement a few years after that. And I've been coaching people for 17 years now, and I'm on a mission basically right now to help Bitcoiners and FIRE adherents to really integrate Bitcoin as deeply into their personal finances as possible. But like I mentioned in the past couple of videos, the process of this metamorphosis that I've gone through, where I've dealt with so much of the middle class in my coaching interactions over the last 15, 16, 17 years. I've learned something that has and still is really difficult for me to metabolize. And that is the fact that, unfortunately, the vast majority of the middle class just doesn't really care about improving their financial situation. I would say, and this is, again, this is hundreds of interactions, coaching interactions, sitting kneecap to kneecap with people that have enough money, they make enough money, they just spend it all. And they have enough money and they have the funds, the resources to engage a coach, but there's just something missing, and there's something missing in the middle class. And I know that if you're a Bitcoiner and you're trying to orange pill people, you're seeing the same thing. And I'm seeing, some of you guys in the comments sort of affirming that. And the problem is with the vast majority of middle class America is they're just kind of riding along on a cloud of something, I don't know, like this kind of vague notion that, everything's going to work out. And I've mentioned in past videos, I think this is very true, that because we've had the exorbitant privilege of having the world reserve currency, that has been a crutch that the middle class has been able to fall back on for several generations now. It's like, hey, I remember hearing this, all through even my adult life. Yeah, man, you can always get a job somewhere. You can always get a job at McDonald's. But, I think as we're seeing, things are changing very rapidly with AI and automation and robotics and all of those things. So all of a sudden we're in this sort of strange, new world. And I think the middle class is absolutely being eviscerated. I do also think that that's by design. And so that's a part of the reason why, as I experience that frustration of trying to get people to just obey sort of the basic tenets of personal finance, there was just this almost stupor that most of them had. I remember one client that I was working with up until, probably about the middle of last year. When she came to me, she thought she had about $70,000 worth of debt. And of course, with all my new clients, I walk through this exercise called the Everything I Owe exercise, where I have them, go offline and make a list of all their bills, all their expenses, and all of their debts. And we take a first pass at that. And, we found she was very surprised to find that she was actually over $100,000 worth of debt. And in the ensuing months, even though, and this is a very common thing, like the average, as I was sort of coaching that cohort, when I would go through that, organization exercise, and then we would jump into the budgeting and tracking exercise, we would typically find that most households were overspending by at least $1,000 to $2,000 a month, more than what they were bringing in. So every month they were going an additional $1,000 to $2,000 into debt. And so I would characterize sadly, and this is going to sound a little bit unkind, I know that, and I don't want to be, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be, like the middle class troll, but I would say that the middle class is a fair thing to say. Most of the middle class is very obtuse when it comes to personal finance. And you just look at the statistics. I mean, even up through, the 2010s, the statistic was that 78% of the population lives paycheck to paycheck. So that means that, 8 out of 10 people walking around are, 1 or 2 paychecks away from a financial catastrophe. I would imagine that given the circumstances that we're in now, that's probably a much higher number. You see the statistics of spiraling consumer debt, credit card debt, car loans. I mean, we're in the trillions now. Credit cards to finance Disney trips. I just watched one of George Camel's videos. He's one of Dave Ramsey's guys. Just watched one of his videos of him interviewing and sort of, kind of gleefully or I guess kind of innocuously trolling the people that he's interviewing, because most of them had put their Disney trip on a credit card, and most of them already had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And then, you're hearing stories like, people are using Afterpay to finance a burrito. And I mean, it's just, you sit back, and my wife and I talk about this all the time, because we even see people, sort of that run in our circles that, just, it kind of goes back to what Thomas Stanley says in the Millionaire Next Door. If you've never read that book, I totally recommend that you read that book. But he talks about just kind of the big hat, no cattle mentality of the middle class. It's like everybody wants to look rich. They want to have a big hat, but they don't really have any cattle. Nobody really wants to be rich, because in order to attain to a certain level of wealth, what he proves in that book is that your everyday millionaire is the guy that pays attention to the pennies and tracks, everything. So yeah, another dimension of what I would call this sort of middle class unraveling, and my consciousness of it was when I discovered Bitcoin, and of course, like the Dave Ramsey stuff and, getting out of $174,000 worth of debt in 2.5 years. Once I discovered Bitcoin, I had already been a hard money guy. I'd already gotten into Austrian economics. I couldn't shut up about it. And and of course, like most people that you share Bitcoin with, if you've tried to orange pill people, it just, it falls flat. They don't understand it. They don't really understand. They might understand price inflation, but they don't really understand monetary inflation. And, like I said, most of the middle class is just really kind of out there on a wing and a prayer, hoping that things are going to get better. Now, the good news is that it's still not totally over for the middle class. I mean, because we do have Bitcoin. We still do have gold and silver. There are some equities. And, if you're following me on this channel, we're talking about, some of the ETFs and some of the ways in the more traditional space that you can utilize the benefits of Bitcoin, and get obviously the capital growth of that over time, but also we're talking about yield and income and stuff like that as well. So I'll throw the numbers up here, but, at today's price, I just looked this up on BitBo. At today's price, you can still get 0.01 Bitcoin for $909.84. And so that's a great way, if you're in the stacking phase of your Bitcoin, to look at like, okay, cool. How can I dollar cost average into Bitcoin? Can I find another $1,000 a month? Or if you can't do that, can I find another $100 a week or another $5 to $10 a day? Whatever it is, if you're doing a dollar cost average, that's a really, really great way to kind of start this Bitcoin savings account that I believe ultimately will bail a lot of people out of the middle class. So yeah, 0.01 is 909, basically $900, and then 0.1 Bitcoin, or a tenth of a Bitcoin, is about a little over almost $1,100 right now. And then I think, kind of what a lot of us that are sort of in this FIRE Bitcoin movement, where, we're talking to people that are part of the FIRE movement. Maybe they want to buy on-chain Bitcoin. Maybe they want to, buy ETFs. Getting to 0.21 Bitcoin is significant, because there will only ever be 21 million that ever exist. So if so there will only be 100 million people that will have the ability to own 0.21 Bitcoin. So right now, 0.21 Bitcoin is just under 20,000. It's about $19,100. So, but the problem is, even when I talk about these things, if you're sort of in the middle class, if you're in debt and you haven't gotten your mind, wrapped around a lot of this stuff yet, the problem for most of the middle class is they don't have that saver or investor mindset just yet. that's something that you kind of have to behave your way into. And I believe in that because that's what has worked for me and my successful clients. It's how it's worked for them as well. And the other part of that is that Bitcoin is and will be a vomit-inducing ride. Okay, so we just came down from all-time highs of 126,000 per coin, rode all the way down to about 81,000. We're sort of back up at 90,000 right now. It could go lower. I'm hearing rumors that, there are more Bitcoin that are, coming onto the exchanges, which can typically mean that there's probably going to be some more selling going on. So in a lot of ways, if I were still a financial coach to the middle class, it's difficult for me to recommend that right now, just because, a lot of people are, if you don't have the long-term view, if you don't have what we Bitcoiners call the low time preference, like you're going to really struggle to not sell when it goes down. And that's what happens. So I all that to say that, I'm very happy to be in this sort of new, fireside Bitcoin sort of movement, merging those two worlds. So I haven't completely abandoned the middle class, but I just know from my own experience and my experience with clients that if you want to escape the middle class, you really have to be the arbiter of that. You're the one that has to bootstrap your way out of that. There really isn't anybody that, can help you do that other than, maybe being involved in a community. So all that to say, what I'm doing now is I'm working with people that, have that long-term view, number one, are already savers and investors and have at least $100,000 in net worth. Because once you've gotten to at least, $50,000 to $100,000 in net worth, you're already looking past that. You're already looking to, okay, how do I get to 200? How do I get to 250, 500, a million? And so you're actively, working on building your net worth. So that was the purpose of this video. I'm kind of doing some videos just as a get to know you, let you sort of into my head, like the experience that I've had as a financial coach, sort of how I moved through that, how I did that as an online business for a good while, how I got super burned out about it, and just sort of the new life that I'm breathing into this YouTube channel where I'm taking, this, if you are an investor and you're newer to Bitcoin or you're newer to the FIRE movement or you're just trying to level up, those are the kinds of conversations that we're having here. So I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. Where are you guys in this process? What would be most helpful for you right now? I'm getting some great feedback for those of you guys that are, new subscribers. Welcome. I really appreciate you liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. That really does help. And I do appreciate, your comments and your questions. So do keep those coming. I'll probably start doing some live sort of hangouts to, engage you guys a little bit more, because I think this new sort of environment is all about connection. And so I'm on a mission to help you, merge the FIRE and Bitcoin movements together and really take your net worth, to the next level. So appreciate you hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, since you made it this far in the video, I wanted to offer 2 resources that will help you integrate Bitcoin more deeply into your personal finances. Number 1, Gemini's Orange Bitcoin MasterCard. You can earn up to 4% Bitcoin on everyday purchases like gas, dining, groceries, retail purchases. There's no annual fee, no foreign transaction fees, and no exchange fees on any of your rewards. Plus, if you sign up today using my link in the video description below, you get $200 in Bitcoin when you spend $3,000 in your first 90 days. And if you're watching this before December 8th, Gemini is currently offering 5% cash back in Bitcoin for everything on every purchase up to $2,500. The link is in the description and the comments below. Number 2, I'm also offering one-to-one calls to answer questions and to help you integrate Bitcoin into your personal finances more deeply, including traditional FIRE and Bitcoin planning, as well as Bitcoin self-custody. The link is in the video description below for that.